Welcome to Transform, Tomorrow's Thinking Today, your guide to the way groundbreaking innovation and digital transformation are reshaping our world. In this episode, you're joining part one of our two-part data centre conversation. Leading the discussion is Ty Hollingsbee, Head of Sustainability for Asia Pacific at GHD. Joining Ty are three other leaders in the field: Samuel Benson, co-founder of OceanBit; Harqs Singh, CTO and co-founder at InfraPartners; and Andrew Morrison, GHD's Australian market leader for property and buildings. Now, over to Ty to kick things off.
Welcome back to Transform. My name is Ty Hollingsbee, and in today's episode, we'll be diving into how infrastructure constraints are driving innovation in data center projects. And to join us in this conversation, we are including some of the leaders who are in the middle of this data transformation play. Hello, Harqs. Hello, Sam. And hello, Andrew.
Hello. Right. Nice to be here.
Super. So a couple of points. First off, that we are all participants in the transforming global data landscape, but we are working in different parts of the project lifecycle. We're working in different countries, we're working at different scales, and we're also working with a range of different clients across the market. But the thing that's common, I think, for all of us is this insatiable demand for compute and processing power, right? Which is manifesting itself in, I'll probably call it like a flood of data center projects that's happening around the world. But the clear thing that we are all seeing is that the infrastructure can't keep up. And just the other day, I was speaking to a client and they were saying they're on a 7-year wait list to get their power turned on for their data center. Now, in that context, these kind of projects just can't exist, right? So my observation has been, what happens when a smart, dynamic, super innovative industry is faced with probably what is viewed as boring, easily solvable problems? And my observation is that they break rules. And I think those kind of rules that they break in the context of what we're talking about here is behind the meter. So Sam, I'm going to go to you first, which is in the context of what I've just shared with you and what we're talking about, like in your world and in your experience, what does behind the meter innovation mean in practice?
Yeah, sure. It's groups and companies finding a solution to one of the bigger bottlenecks of developing data centers at the moment. And behind the meter is these groups are finding the solution in generating their own electricity without transporting it into the grid first. So effectively, they're bypassing all of the bureaucracy, the tangible physical barriers of transmitting that energy, and they're generating it themselves through multiples of methods of generation. So diesel generation, renewable energy with solar and batteries, and alternative energy, finding stranded hydro or other baseload energy sources.
Yeah. So Sam, like the idea of like an energy island, a self-sufficient energy center.
Yeah, you're right. They're internalizing the power generation so that they don't have to rely on an external service.
And I think in your context, Andrew, with the clients in the market that you're involved in, have you seen how the business model has evolved as a result of effectively looking inwards to solve an outwards problem?
Yeah, look, I think it's quite fascinating to see how both the industry and the businesses themselves are evolving to sort of meet these challenges. And it's across a few different fronts. You know, probably the first one is through private investment, which is sort of what Sam was talking about there, where there's sort of, into the local infrastructure to support the data centers. So we've seen examples of private equity investing in on-site water and energy generation so that off-grid solutions are available for data centers. Another way is through technological innovation. We've just seen Helion Energy commence construction on a nuclear fusion, not nuclear fission, but nuclear fusion plant. And they've only got one customer for that, which is Microsoft and its data centers. So certainly technology innovation is changing the business model as well. And then I think the other level is really at government. And, in order to sort of remove some of the red tape and facilitate the approvals process, in Australia, New South Wales has created the Investment Delivery Authority, which is really to sort of turbocharge the business investment in New South Wales, and it's got $80 million in innovation funding this year. Further afield in Thailand, we've seen the government invest, I think it's $15.4 billion US dollars in AI strategy. They've got an AI governance practice centre, which is being built in collaboration with UNESCO to sort of provide, policy exchanges, ethics frameworks, sort of like sandboxes that let investors experiment without all the risks of regulatory approvals and things like that. So lots of different ways that it's being tackled, but it's quite fascinating to see the different approaches.
And it's super fast as well, right? Harqs, you're in London right now.
That's correct, yes.
And you and InfraPartners work around the world. But what kind of things are you seeing in the market around behind the meter sort of hunger, or at least what kind of solutions they're trying to push through to get them turning on the data centers faster?
If you step back a little bit, if you look at the challenge we have as an industry, there's a lot of growth coming. And if you look at the projections, the growth is in the order of 70 to 200 gigawatts by 2030, depending on whose research you believe, but it's still a significant amount. And prefab, which is what we're focused on, and offsite manufacturing is going to be part of the solution. But there's some real problems. I mean, power availability is the first problem, as you guys have mentioned, and behind the meter solves for some of that. Labor scarcity is the second. We're seeing around the world that you can't find these skills to build these data centers. And the third thing is schedule certainty in terms of being able to deliver data centers when you need them. And so what we've found is by taking a different approach, this industrialized, standardized approach with our prefab model, what we do is we do 80% of the work in the factory and 20% on site. And that's really solves for that labor scarcity issue. And then from a schedule perspective, McKinsey recently released some research called the next big arenas of competition, essentially the 18 industries that are going to be trillion-dollar markets by 2035, 2040. And prefab and modular was one of them. Their research showed that you can do construction about 20 to 50% faster based on a prefab model. And that's what we're seeing as well with the projects we're doing. So there really are some acute problems to be able to solve, to be able to get this growth and get it online for this AI growth and this wave that's coming. And so we're focused on a couple of those. And I think behind the meter solutions, to your point, being able to find grid power is getting more and more difficult. And so, if you look at things like batteries, on-site generation, fuel cells, other kinds of generation, everything is on the table right now to be able to deliver this growth.
And because the business environment has changed around that, right? Because things are moving so fast, and specifically in the AI space. And I mean, I'm going to point to you again, Harqs, because we can attempt to try to talk about what might happen in 10 years' time, but frankly, in next 5 years' time, that compute and processing power is growing at an enormous rate. So being ready and being future fit, and then having a data center that enables that infrastructure to be catered for in the future. Can you talk about how prefabrication and the methodology that you have at InfraPartners is supporting that? How does that enable the upgradable data center, for example?
Yeah, and Ty, the upgradable data center is a concept that we released recently. And it's really about how do you get data centers to evolve at the pace of technology change. If you look at NVIDIA's GPU roadmap, they're releasing new chips every year. And data centers historically have been 10, 15, 20-year assets. And so in the future, what's going to happen is the constant is going to be the power that's available on site, whether that's through grid or on-site generated. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the maximum return and revenue from that power. And the only way to do that really is to deploy the latest GPUs from NVIDIA and then have a data center that's flexible, that evolves and is upgradable at the same pace as technology change. And that's exactly what our upgradable data center concept is about, is how do we evolve with the chip roadmap to be able to enable the sort of high sustainable returns for that power.
Oh, for sure. And you use the S word, Harqs, sustainable. I think there's an ongoing debate, tension between sustainability and data centers and the like. But I think what you have in your high precision, prefabricated, super well-designed product offer is actually synergetic to, I think, what you do, Sam, with OceanBit. Now, you're literally offshore data centers. So like a data center on a ship, right?
Yeah, that's exactly a very succinct summary of our Class 1 concept, which is developing a data center with a completely behind-the-meter power source and deploying these in locations of high demand and high access to the international subsea communication network. So we're leveraging these already established points into the countries, and we can put renewable energy, removing the data centers from consuming that land resource, that water resource, and that electrical resource that can be put to other industries and the communities, and removing them from that constriction. At the core of our concept is a long-term sustainable solution of removing data centers from those land-bound restrictions.
Yeah. And with OceanBit and what you're doing, and I suppose your thermodynamic approach with your solution is to utilize the ocean as a medium for heat transfer, right?
Well, that's it. It's the biggest natural battery on Earth. So the technology that we're using is ocean thermal energy conversion, and it in very simple terms, we're extracting energy from that temperature difference from deep cold water and warm water. But as a waste product, we have a significant amount of excess cooling water that is utilized to cool the data center at no extra consumption of energy.
So, Harqs, when you think about your future projects, when you think about what Sam and his business is doing, do you see any overlap in businesses like yours and what Sam and that sort of, I would say, describe as the edge of innovation, looking at alternative cooling methodologies and things like that? How do you see that playing into changes that might be coming up for data center design?
Yeah, I think what Sam is doing is really at the bleeding edge. As we grow the data center estates globally to be able to hit this huge growth for AI, right now it's a race. And what you're seeing in this race is everybody is trying to power up GPUs as quickly as possible with whatever power source they can find, because there's a scarcity there. I think as we go further towards 2030, there'll be some reflection on have we used the most sustainable sources. And energy generation is not the easiest to switch on in terms of renewable power or sustainable power. So I think it'll be a slower transition. But I think we need to keep focused on the energy source conversation and make sure over time, once this race has played out a little bit, that we do keep driving towards some of these sustainable sources and look at synergies between the generation side and how the data center is built and how also the chips use the power. And I think if you start looking across the whole stack, you'll start to find ways to be able to meet all of those objectives around being able to deliver AI compute, training, inference in data centers that are flexible using the most sustainable and low carbon power sources.
Andrew, commentary from you about the market and its appetite for this kind of thinking, like actual investor appetite to implement something that's different.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we haven't touched on as well is social license and the social license that these companies need to be able to deliver data centers in prime real estate locations. So, I think when I think of data centers, there's three finite resources, really valuable resources that are used significantly, which is land, water, and energy. One of the unique things about OceanBit is that it requires none of those off the grid anyway. So it uses water and energy, but not from the traditional sources. But I think, when we look at sustainability as well, is the social license required to build data centers, which at the moment in certain areas don't have the greatest reputation because it takes land, power and water from residents and from other communities. So, I think the opportunity for investors is through innovation to really lead the way and show what can be given back to communities. I mean, my personal view is that these aren't just pieces of infrastructure, they're pieces of social infrastructure. And that in the future, when we're building social infrastructure like hospitals, train stations, schools, we should also be considering data centers as part of the conversation, because the data centers will be powering and enabling all of those other bits of social infrastructure. And so alongside social infrastructure is social license. And that's where I think the opportunity for investors in the market is to really lead the way through some of the innovative solutions that we're discussing here today to really build that social license with the community.
Yeah, I think it's a very important human aspect of the gargantuan change that the data center world brings to cities and communities. And Harqs, Star Wars, I can see a saber in the corner. Thinking about the future, let's think about the next 5-10 years, and you got investors knocking on your door. If you could do something really, a quick, short, sharp tip to investors around being ready for changes around infrastructure and what they could do to be smarter to enable their data centers to turn on faster in the current climate. What are some of your tips, Harqs?
I think the biggest thing to look at is how do you make the largest possible sustainable return over the next 5-10 years? And I think history has built data centers in one way. I think the future is going to be very different. And I think Andrew is right where he's mentioned you need to look at what's the impact on local communities. And I think some of these data centers can actually have a positive impact on local communities. Although they take some resources, they can become more net positive where they provide resources and inference and knowledge and intelligence to the community, which I think is differentiating and would generate huge amounts of productivity. The other thing I think also is if you do look at this from a sustainability perspective is you can tap into more capital pools for deployment of capital into this space, not just digital infrastructure or AI infrastructure. There's also all the ESG funds. And I think if you look at the way capital is going to change and the amount of dollars that goes into these ESG pools is going to grow, that will give the industry more access to capital to be able to deliver real impact. Right now, Everyone is trying to get there really quickly and as fast as possible. We're really early in this AI race, and I think folks are trying to really become the market leader in general intelligence. But there'll also be industry models as well, specific to companies, but also industries. And I think it's really exciting what AI can enable in the future. And I think we have to sort of enable that as an industry from a data center perspective around the world and really participate in the value that comes out of it as well. And so that's not just value in terms of intelligence, but also for the community and be able to get returns for investors at the same time.
Yeah, I think you're bang on with that, Harqs. Enabler. I think we as participants in the industry are all enablers around this, and to do it with social license, to do it with due care to the environment is also part of our expertise, and that should be utilized to its maximum for the benefit of our communities. And if I could wrap up with you, Sam, what would your tip be to, well, maybe your next investor, right? Well, how does the industry or the investment cycle need to maybe be adaptable to meeting the demand that's currently out there in the market?
Well, I'm going to take a bit from Andrew and a bit from Harqs in this one, because I think it's the fast part of the race has kicked off, and it's the long-term concept of what a data center brings to not only the dollar in the back pocket, but these are significant developments that are going to get bigger and draw more and consume more. But if we look at them as almost an infrastructure requirement, because the demand is there and it's next to the dollar, it's on everyone's phone, it's everyone's access and utility. And so the development and the concept of what a data center can bring, it's more than just the data portion. If it's the behind the meter development, then it's releasing megawatts that would either be sent to the data center to some other industry or community. It could stimulate jobs. It could stimulate a growth of industry around a location. So it could be used as a tool to actually develop more and assist in the whole community's growth. So instead of just consuming, there's the ability to bring value to that environment around it. And that happens through the sustainable kind of development. It happens through prefabrication, having better construction methods, having better efficiencies in the entire cycle, so that it doesn't just become an eyesore of you lose your social license to continue to operate. You bring value not only through information and industry, but through kind of ancillary services.
Thank you, Sam. That's great. What I've heard today in our conversation is probably summarizing like a holistic design systems thinking approach to data centers, right? Not just the tech bit, but the human bit, the environmental bit, thinking about how can we make use of the ocean as a thermal medium. And I suppose being bold and brave to the very real physical constraints around infrastructure and the provisions of that for data center projects. So thank you for your time today, Sam, Harqs, Andrew. Fantastic conversation. And for the next episode, Andrew will be talking about the role of AI and in regional places and how the constraints and physical parameters of those projects might be different to the things that we'll be talking about today. But there's a whole big world out there with many problems and solutions that are here for us to uncover. Thanks again to Harqs, Sam, and Andrew, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Ty.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Transform, Tomorrow's Thinking Today, a podcast for GHD produced by Sound Cartel. Follow Transform free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.